So last time, what we looked at was ways to configure our our scales from a combination of half step and whole step patterns to create a sense of coherence for pitches. So we have isolated pitches, but by organizing them in a certain way, we can kind of make sense out of music. And people have been doing this for hundreds of years. It's a very common thing to do. So today we're going to talk about ways to kind of continue to streamline that reduction of pitch into scale by having what we call key signatures. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, let's start and do some review. So this is what we covered yesterday. Write out the major scale given the first note. In this case, we have this first pitch, which go ahead and drop in the chat real quick, lightning round. What is this first pitch? Yeah, that's right. Great. It is in fact an E flats. Very nice. Very nice. E flats. There's the G. Space below is F. Line below that is E with the flat. E flat. What is the pattern of half steps and whole steps? It is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. There's not a great mnemonic for that, as I said, but having that kind of cadence with it can often helps a lot of students out. So take, let's say take 30 seconds and write out or scribble out or imagine the pattern of half steps and whole steps, considering all that we talked about yesterday. So 30 seconds. Okay, so by my clock, that was 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. There it is. So we know that because we start on E flats, we know we're not going to have any sharps, because remember, in the major scale, we do not mix flats and sharps. It's not necessary for a variety of reasons. So remember that scales use each note once. So notice that we've got E through E. We use each letter name only one time. And in order to get our half step pattern, we have a whole step, lower A to give us a half step, whole step, and then E flat itself gives us a half step there at the end. So that kind of takes care of itself. So this key signature has, pardon me, this scale, this major scale has 3 flats in it: whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So nice work on that. Let's do something else now, given the scale that we've just written. So now that we have a scale, what are the scale degrees of the following passage? So remember, if we assign a number 1 through 7 to each of these, regardless of where it falls in register, in clef, in instrument, regardless of where, every single E flat in the scale of E flat will be 1. Every single G in the scale of E flat will be 3, and so on and so forth. So take this quick example. It's only, I think, what, 6 notes? Yep, 6 notes. Take 30 seconds. What are the scale degrees for this passage of music right here? Okay, so starting right off the bat, we start on E flat. That's pretty straightforward. E flat is 1. In the key of E flat is 1. We then go up to C, which is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. We go down to B flat, which is 5. We skip down to G, which is 3. F is 2. E flat again is 1. 1, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, and so on. So that's the basics. As I've mentioned yesterday, everything that's on your homework that's due tonight is this. So you are fully equipped to do that. Today, we're going to talk about ways to kind of continue to streamline this process, particularly with how we work with all of these accidentals. So before we get into the specifics of that, let's talk about something as a quick diversion that pertains to major scales, which is enharmonic scales, enharmonic. There are 12 unique pitches on a keyboard, the 7 white keys and the 5 black keys. And any of them could be the basis for starting a major scale. As we said last time, a scale can start and end from anywhere. But in practice, for scales that begin on the black keys, some of these aren't really in use. And you'll see what I mean. The ones that aren't in use are the scales that require double sharps or double flats to get what we need. So I don't know if you remember double sharps and double flats. Basically, they're just accidentals that let us move a whole step instead of a half step. They're not used very often because they're very cumbersome. And there's a couple different scales, depending on which black key you start on, that because of where you begin, requires double sharps and double flats. For instance, if we start on A flat gives us 4 flats and 3 white key natural notes. So we're all good to go. That's not a problem. But if we think of the same key, that same key on the keyboard, G sharp, that would be its enharmonic equivalent. It's the same pitch, but a different name. Notice that if we write it as if it's G sharp, we have each of our letter names. We use just sharps so we don't mix accidentals. By necessity, when we get to the end here, we have to raise it up a whole step or else it's not going to be far enough. And this is a problem for musicians. So rather than trying to deal with this, we'll often just use A flat and just ignore G sharp major, for instance. These are called enharmonic scales. So scales that are built in the same pitches, but written using different letters and accidentals. These two scales would sound the same to our ears, but on the page, they look very different. And it's because of how they look, with the double sharp in particular, that we avoid them. So some of these we'll see a lot, some of these we won't. So as far as scales goes, we're going to primarily be dealing with the scales that are in common use. I won't assign any scales that require double sharps or double flats to make. In different versions of this class or for music majors, it can be kind of a fun theoretical exercise to like, what's D double sharp major? And you get all these really funky accidentals, but that's not really useful because musicians don't, like, it's only a theoretical exercise. So I won't be assigning any of those. I will say that when we get into minor scales in weeks to come, minor scales get complicated with enharmonic stuff, but that's a future us's problem. So for right now, basically the scales we'll be working with are scales that will only require flats or only require sharps, nothing trickier than that. So enharmonic scales, a bit of a sidebar. Now, in terms of what are all the other possible scales, we've looked at a bunch of them. If you recall yesterday, we made like 5 or 6 of them. So we already got through a big chunk of them. Since we know why some scales aren't in common use. This is every single scale, major scale, I should say, that you'll generally ever see. So these are all the possible scales we can get with our sharps or flats. Now, here's the thing. We know how to make these from scratch. I'm not showing you this to illustrate that this is something to be memorized by rote. Performers often will do that, but we do not need to. We know how to build these from scratch because we know the half-step pattern, we know the properties of scales. But what I want to illustrate is this. So notice that we've got natural, right? This is going to be important later. Basically, the way that certain scales work out, we've got a scale with no sharps and flats, a scale with 1 sharp, a scale with 2 sharps, 3 sharps, 4 sharps, and so on, up until every single note has been sharped. Conversely, we've got 1 flat, 2 flats, 3 flats, and so on and so on and so on until every single note has been flat. And notice that if we take a scale that starts on C, it's natural. If we lower C, every single note's going to be lowered. And if we raise C, every single note's going to be raised. So this is just kind of an illustration of just kind of like some of the relationships between these scales. The rest of the class will be talking a lot about these different dynamics, especially next week. So as I said, you don't need to memorize these, but I'm also showing you this because there's not 12 scales here because certain enharmonic ones are missing. Noticeably, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. Those are 3 black keys that you won't see here. You still have A flat and E flat and B flat, but you won't have their enharmonic equivalents, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp. And then I can't remember, did I have something at the bottom here? I sure didn't. So Let's now pivot to the main meat of today's class, which is what exactly is a key signature? So we know what a scale is, but besides making them constantly from scratch every time, is there a more convenient or quicker way to write them? And the answer is yes. Musicians don't actually normally write their scales using accidentals all the time. We use a key signature as a kind of musical shorthand to get the same information across. Key signatures are a way to visually represent the accidentals we need to form a scale. So we can use the terms scale and key interchangeably to describe the collection of notes in a piece. Scale and key are the same thing. A piece could be in the key of G major or written using a G major scale. In this way, those terms are synonymous. Besides showing us the accidentals in a piece's scale, they also allow us to use less accidentals in every measure. So we move all the accidentals in the scale to the key signature. And what I mean by that is, like when we talked about dots last week, there are certain things that arose because it became cumbersome to copy and to constantly print all these rhythms, all these accidentals. This is in some way musical shorthand, but in the case of key signature, it really does make it easier to read, because instead of that, if you're playing a C sharp major where every single note has a sharp on it, it allows us to put all those sharps to the left and just kind of, remember that they're all sharped, and then it allows us to play easier and with less visual information. But I'm describing something that's visual. What the heck do these look like? Here is a quote unquote anatomy of a key signature. So this right here is the key signature. Notice we've got our clef for pitch information, and then here is our meter, our time signature. Right there in the middle is where the key signature goes. So here's a passage of music, there's the key signature. The piece is in B flat major, which is this scale right here. B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. The key signature transfers the accidentals, and the B flat's doubled, so we don't need to worry about that one. It transfers the accidentals to the left of the clef, right? Near the clef, I should say. So notice that the lines and the spaces where flats are correspond to their pitches. So notice that this isn't just two flats. It's specifically the line for B and the space for E. B flat, E flat. We've transferred the accidentals from the scale over to the left. Now what this means is that we don't need these specific accidentals if they're needed in the music. So this note right here is a B flat. There's a B flat in the key signature. Therefore, this note here is also flatted, unless otherwise stated. This is another reason why natural signs come into play so often. If we wanted to show it as a B natural, we would need to mark it as a natural, and so on. Now, you will see accidentals all over the place in music, even that has key signatures, but any accidental that would be required without the key signature is taken care of by the key signature, and so on. So we're going to spend the rest of today talking about identifying key signatures, both for sharps and for flats. And then tomorrow, we're going to talk about writing key signatures and doing some more work with our scales. So any questions before I play this little brief example of what this piece is from? Okay, key signatures are the kind of thing that, in my experience teaching this class, are pretty easy to comprehend conceptually. As a concept, they're pretty straightforward. It's the nitty gritty, the details that gets kind of complicated. So we're going to spend a lot of time on key signatures, but hopefully conceptually we're all good right now. So here is this piece. This is a piece by the Czech composer Dvorak. It's Four Romantic Pieces #1. So the violin is playing this top part here. And if you were to be playing along, so to speak, either on a melodica or a keyboard or singing along, this would be a B flat. So here this is. Oh, oops, sorry about that. Come on now. Okay. So we know what they are. How do I identify them? How do I identify what a key signature is? So memorizing the number of sharps and flats in all the major keys can be cumbersome. Like I said, we don't need to memorize which keys have which accidentals and where, because we know how to build a scale from scratch, and we also can learn how to build a key signature from scratch. We can look at the key signature and figure out what the first pitch of the scale is. So as a bit of terminology, yet another vocab word, the note that a scale is named for, scale degree 1, is also called the tonic. T-O-N-I-C, tonic. We can refer to scale degree 1 and tonic interchangeably. The tonic of the piece is describing the scale degree that the scale is named for, number 1. Unfortunately, we need different processes to figure out the key signatures for sharp keys versus flat keys. So we can look at a key signature and identify what the first pitch is by looking at the configuration, but it's a different process for sharps versus flats. Luckily, there is some overlap, and this is what we call the order of flats, the order of sharps. And I'll explain why these are related in a second. To determine what the tonic of a key signature is, we need to know how these accidentals are configured. And we do so because accidentals have a fixed presentation in key signatures. This is what's nice. Key signatures build in complexity. So the more flats a key signature has, it's essentially built off of a key signature that has less flats. They increase in complexity. You won't have a key signature that has flats like scatterbrained. They basically get deeper and deeper and deeper. In order to do this and to know what these are, we use the order of flats and the order of sharps to know this. This is the order of flats. I have a cute little mnemonic for us we can get to in a second. B, E, A, D, G, C, F. This is referring to flats. If you have 1 flat, it's B flats. If you have 4 flats, it's B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat. If you have 3 flats, it's B flat, E flat, A flat, and so on. Key signatures will not ever have something like A flat, G flat, and F flat. It's impossible. They have to go left to right. It's an order. If you need to remember what the order is, here's a cute little mnemonic. You can come up with your own. In my experience, learning the languages or memorizing things, it's better to have your own mnemonics for things. But here's an example that I thought was quite funny. Better eat a darn good chicken fajita. There's all kinds of other ones. It's just a way to remember what pitches, the order of these pitches. B, E, A, D, G, C, F. Conveniently for us, the order of sharps is simply the order of flats, but in reverse. The order of sharps is F, C, G, D, A, E, B. So here's the thing. We have to know that they're different systems, and we have to remember which one is which. But if we remember one of them, we can then just reverse it to get the other one. So if you remember that the order of flats is B, E, A, D, G, C, F, and put that on the top of your scratch paper or your margins on your midterm or your quizzes or whatever. If you know that, then all you have to do is just flip it to get sharps. So that's pretty handy. That's convenient for us. So let's talk about flats first then, since we learned the order of flats first. So let's look at what the heck this all means in context. So here is all 7 flats in a key signature. Basically, because of this ordering, all key signatures can be thought of as increasing in the number of flats from left to right, following the order of flats. If you only had 2 flats, it would be these 2 flats. If you had 4 flats, it would be these 4 flats. If you had 6 flats, it would be these 6 flats, and so on. And you can see that the spaces and lines that the flats fall on correspond to our pitches. B is on the B line, E is on the E flat, is on the E line, or rather space. A is on the A space, D is on the D line, and so on and so on and so on. And like I said, I'm gonna hammer this home because this is often a point of confusion for a lot of students. If we have 4 flats, it has to be B, E, A, and D flat. If it's in a key signature, music can be written with whatever it wants, but if it's in the key signature, it has to be in this configuration. That is an absolute requirement. So let's look at how to determine, given this, what the tonic is. So the people that I see on webcam look like you're taking notes. If you aren't taking notes, this is a place that I would recommend taking notes. because for each for flats and for sharps, we have different configurations, different kind of algorithms, flowcharts, processes, whatever you want to call it. The process for flats is this. You go to the penultimate or second to last, if you don't know what penultimate means, second to last flat in your key signature. We see 3 flats. We know our order of flats. We know that those 3 flats must be these 3. And you go second to last. Second to last means that E flat is your tonic pitch. Second to last flat is E flat. Therefore, this is an E flat major. So even though A flat is the last flat, the scale is named for this one. And the reason for that, oh yeah, in order to do this effectively, you have to know the order of flats. The reason for that is because if you plug in these flats into your key signature and start on E flat, you get the correct pattern of half steps and whole steps, as you can see here. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step. So if you started this on A flat with these accidentals, you'd get a different key signature, or you'd get a different scale entirely. So this is what's going to get us E flat major, is by doing it this way. So any questions on that? Okay. Let's pivot now and talk about sharps a little bit. So here's sharps. We'll talk about writing tomorrow. The exact configuration of these is actually going to be really important when we start writing. If there's one flat, does that mean it's a B flat? Donovan, that's an excellent question we'll get to in a little bit. Yeah, the scale that has 1 flat is a bit of an exception. As you can see, if we go to the second to the last flat, the second to the last of 1 is 0. We'll talk about that. That is the only exception in this entire system. So we'll get to that. But yeah, that's a great question. So sharp keys behave in the same way as flat keys. They function the same. Sharps go from left to right, and the number of sharps correspond to their order. So remember, order of sharps backwards: F, C, G, D, A, E, B, F line, C line, G space. G is usually up on top. That's just an idiomatic thing. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. D line, A space, E space, B line. And just like flats, what this means is if we have 4 sharps, it has to be these 4 sharps: F, C, G, and D. Has to be. If it's in the key signature, it has to be in that order. You will never see a floating E sharp as a key signature. That's impossible. So let's talk about how we identify sharp keys, because it's a different process than flat keys. So here is that process for determining from this visual information here what scale degree 1 is, what your tonic pitch is. Go to the last sharp in your key signature. So if we have 3 sharps, F, C, and G, go to G. That's the last one. This note, G sharp, is kind of the same as scale degree 7. And if we want to find scale degree 1 from scale degree 7 and think of our pattern of half steps and whole steps, 7 to 1 in our pattern is only a half step. So if we take G sharp and go up a half step to the next letter name, we get our tonic pitch. So if we go up a half step from G sharp, up a half step from G sharp is A, therefore this is an A major. And just like with the flats, if we were to plug in this into a scale that's written A to A, we would get an A major scale. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And you can see what I mean by G sharp being scale degree 7, up a half step from G sharp gives us A. Questions? We're actually blazing through this today, but it is a lot of content. So please feel free to stop me. We do have some practice prepared though. Okay. So let's do some review of the processes. You will have to some of this is memorizing. We'll talk more about the visual components tomorrow, but here is a full flat key signature and a fully sharp key signature. The order of flats, B, E, A, D, G, C, F, and then the order of sharps, which is that reversed, F, C, G, D, A, E, B. We need to memorize one of these 2. And if you want to do this one, you could use my little chicken fajita mnemonic, whatever you want. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, F flat, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, E sharp, B sharp. And then here are the steps for finding your tonic. The penultimate flat is your tonic. Whatever the second to last accidental is, that's your tonic. The final sharp is scale degree 7. Find your final sharp and go up a half step. That gives you your tonic for sharp keys. Take care to not confuse these, because if you mix them up, you will get completely wrong answers. So this is, again, it's relatively straightforward, but it does require a lot of kind of memorization and kind of categorizing this information into the right places in our mind. So questions before we turn to some examples now. Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry, my internet cut out for a second. We can all see me and hear me, I'm assuming? Yes, great. Okay, cool, great. Okay. What was the lesson that we all heard? We were on this slide, tonic. Oh, so like this down here, this information down here? Oh, cool. So it did just cut out where it seemed to, okay, cool. Sorry about that, everybody. Hopefully the recording's not messed up, but in any case, we'll figure that out. Okay, so yeah, we talked about this process down here. You heard all that? I'm assuming. Okay, let's do some practice now. Practice time. Here are 5 key signatures. We're going to begin and end with trick questions. So let's look at some different key signatures and practice identifying their tonic pitches. So if you would all think back, there is only one key signature that does. Hi, everyone. This is what I get for, being at work. Here we go. So try this again. Okay. Take 3. Not from the beginning. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Not there. Let's go here. Okay. Current slide. Lord have mercy. Here we go. What scale has no sharps or flats? There's only one of them. We talked about it yesterday. What scale has no sharps or flats? Yay, C major, yes. This is one of our technically it's an exception. It's technically an exception because it has no key signature. So we just have to memorize that C major is the one that begins and ends on C. Okay. It has no accidentals. It's pretty straightforward. We call it the natural key signature sometimes. So here we go. Next up, I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Identify the key signature and then test it by writing it out and seeing if that fits your whole step and half step pattern. So this key signature here, 5 sharps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 sharps major, take 2 minutes, figure out the tonic and test it by writing out the scale. Okay, so that was 2 minutes by my clock. If this were in the before times, and we were in an actual classroom, I'd be asking somebody to remind us how we find the tonic for a sharp key. Does anybody want to either type or unmute themselves and say, if we have a sharp key, what's the process for figuring out what the tonic is? Ha ha ha, yes, exactly. Yes, great, great. Thank you to both of you in the chat. Great. So if we do that, what do we get for this scale then? What is our answer for this? Feel free to type it in the chat or unmute. I see B major. I see B major. Yes, it is in fact B major. And if we test this out and we write our half steps and whole steps, B to C sharp is a whole step. C sharp to D sharp is a whole step. D sharp to E natural is a half step. E to F sharp is a whole step. F sharp to G sharp is a whole step. G sharp to A sharp is also a whole step. And then A sharp to B is our half step. Yes, very, very nice. Okay, next one, 5 flats for your major key signature now. 5 flats. Yes, Andolin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a little confused on that one. So it's
Sure.
you go to the last sharp in your key signature.
Mhm.
I got D sharp because I thought so like 4 sharps would lead you to D.
This is 5 though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then A is the space.
Well, that changes things.
Yeah, there you go. That's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, luckily, just like with the scales, there's so much information all at once, but luckily, in the grand scheme of things, there's not that many possibilities. And the more that we work with all of these, we'll get more familiar with certain ones and just kind of memorize them on the spot. Okay, so 5 flats major, same situation. Take 2 minutes, figure out what the tonic is, and then test it by writing out the scale. 2 minutes. Okay, so I turn back to you again. What is the process for identifying tonic for flat keys? Either type or unmute. It's different than sharps. Yeah, penultimate flat. Yeah, great. Yeah, the way that Sunny just put that in the chat, that's the way that I like to think of it too. Penultimate flat. Penultimate seems like kind of a complicated word, but it's a way to say second to last in one word. Here we go. So if that's the case, the penultimate flat in this key signature is what? Drop it in the chat. Yep, D flat, D flat, D flat. Indeed, yes, it is D flat. We can see that it's on the D line, D flat. We also know our order of flats, B, E, A, D. D flat. If we test this out, D flat, E flat is a whole step, E flat, F whole step, F to G flat, half step, G flat, A flat, whole step, A flat, B flat, whole step, B flat, C flat, pardon me, B flat to C, whole step, and C to D flat, half step. Whole, half, whole, half. Great. Sharps, one more review. This one should be easier. Start with the harder one, hypothetically. Knock on wood. So take another minute and a half for this one, a little bit less time, minute and a half. Okay, I'm not going to make you explain what sharps are again. We know that the last sharp was up a half step. That gives us scale degree 7, up a half step gives us our tonic. So what is the tonic for the scale right here? I see D major. Anybody else? I see also D major, D major. Yeah, it is in fact D major. C sharp up a half step to the next letter is D. We have F sharp and C sharp, whole step, half step between F sharp and G, whole step, whole step between B and C sharp, half step between C sharp and D. Very, very nice. Now, I'm not going to have you do the last one because the last one is a trick question that Donovan thankfully foreshadowed for us earlier. If C is one of our exceptions, the sole other exception is F. F major is the only one that doesn't fit into either of our rules because it's only one flat. So on the bright side, one exception isn't too hard to remember. Now you may be wondering, what about one sharp? One sharp works. One sharp would be F sharp. F sharp up a half step is G. G major is one sharp. So it does work for sharps. For whatever reason, well, for a variety of reasons we don't need to get into, let's put it that way. F major just needs the one B flat. And you get your pattern, whole, half, whole, half. So you just have to memorize that one. If there's one you memorize, it's F. And then C is also kind of an exception, but C doesn't really count because it's just nothing. So yeah, F major is the only exception, the only one that doesn't work within our system. Every single other flat key and sharp key works within our paradigms, especially sharp keys without fail. So questions? Okay. So that's actually all I had for today. We're going to keep it a little bit short. We talked about, there's just so much content this week. We'll end a little bit early today. I will stick around if anybody has any questions. I know that I had to cancel office hours again. That will not happen a third time. Tomorrow, we will continue our practice of identifying key signatures. So we will continue to practice what we just did. We'll also then reverse the process to write them. I considered having us do writing today. We would have spent the last half hour doing that, but I figured I'll just leave it at that and we'll do some writing tomorrow. Spoiler alert, you just reverse the process for identifying, but it's harder than it sounds in many cases. Next week, we're gonna basically do everything we did this week, but for minor scales, although it's not quite that bad. So minor scales, because we changed that pattern of whole steps and half steps, minor scales are kind of a whole different beast. for their writing their scales. And then in addition, the key signature of it all complicates things for minor scales a bit, but we'll get to that next week. So that's next time. And then just so we're all aware that this is going to happen, the end of next week will be your midterm. You will still have a quiz. The quiz will still be due Friday. The midterm will be take home, and you'll have the entire weekend to do it. So it'll be due, I think, like Sunday night at midnight. That's week after next. So that'll all be posted on Gotcha Space, but just so you're aware, summer moves very quick if you've never taken a summer class before. We are already a third of the way done, essentially. So by the end of next week, we'll be at the midpoint. So sorry about that, but it is what it is. Your TAs know that you have homework assignments in. They both mentioned that they're working on getting your first week assignments graded. You get instant feedback on quizzes, and I think once the quiz period has closed, you can see whether you get it right or not. If you have any questions on that, just let me know. I'd be happy to send you a key if you want some more specific feedback, and homework will be graded soon. I would probably give them a week to do your homework that's due tonight, just so you all know. But in any case, does anybody have any questions about today's material, other material, logistics? And I should say that if you don't have any questions, thank you so much. Thank you for dealing with my tech support problems. One of my my grad instructors always likes to joke about Zoom bingo, where like every time somebody has a Zoom session, you could basically like do a 5 square, just find all the things that'll possibly go wrong. So thank you all for dealing with that, and thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. I will see you all tomorrow, unless you want to stick around and ask me some questions. So bye, everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye.
Thank you.